Hey James, how are you doing?
I'm all right, mate. How are you this evening? Well, this afternoon.
I just had a nap, actually. I laid on the couch for 10 minutes earlier on and had a little
Yeah.
nap, so I'm fully refreshed now. How about you?
Oh, I'm cream crackered, me, mate. But looking forward to this. There's a lot to talk about now.
Yeah, there sure is. How come you're so knackered?
Well, I was on the beer yesterday, wasn't I? So
Oh,
I don't,
right.
I'm not as young as I used to be. Not as young as I used to be, Bob.
Yes, well, I used to be a semi-professional drinker in my youth, and the hangover started to hit me really bad when I was in my mid to late 40s, and so
Yeah.
me and the booze had to part company then because yeah, you can't you,
You
yes,
can't win. You can't win.
no,
So
well, oh well. You have my empathy. I remember those days.
not the sympathy though, mate, because I've done it to myself. So yeah.
That's why I said you have my empathy. I know how you
Yeah,
feel.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, we have a lot to talk about. And I thought maybe we could do a double session if that works for you. And
Yeah, definitely.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I thought the first thing that maybe we could talk about, since it's the most topical thing, is the passing of the great George Foreman. Where does George Foreman sit with you, and what were your memories of Foreman? And I know that you're a keen student of boxing history, not just boxing that's current today. What are your thoughts on Big George?
I was having this discussion with a friend of mine yesterday. We were talking about it, and I would rank him at number four in heavyweight history. I know, like on Porky's Corner, I've discussed this, and Russ gives me a lot of ag for it. But on certain days, I'll switch between Lennox Lewis and Muhammad Ali at number one, and then so depending on who you've got. So if I had Lennox Lewis at number one, Ali's at number two, which means Joe Lewis is number three. Foreman at four, just because of his it was phenomenal. Do you know what I mean? The man had two careers, two boxing careers, and then he had his careers as a minister, careers as an entrepreneur. He was quite something, wasn't he? You
Yeah.
know, yeah, he was sultry. He was your favourite sort of uncle. He was an everyman, really was an everyman. And I think the boxing world, it's very much a cliche, but I think the boxing world is emptier today for his death. Lack of presence in the world.
Yeah, I just uploaded a career retrospective on George Foreman, and a few days ago I uploaded a top 10 my lifetime, and I had George Foreman at number 4 in my lifetime, which goes back to 1960, so the last 65 years. Um, at some point, possibly as early as next weekend, I'm going to have completed my all time list.
Yeah,
And it's going to be interesting where Big George sits then, because uh, I'm leaning to, well, I don't want to give the game away, but there is space at the very top of the tree for people who were active before 1960. So,
yeah,
yeah, but I think regardless, I think people would definitely include him in, like, he has to be in anybody's top 10, I would think.
yeah. Just simply because of his obvious longevity. And to be honest, I don't think that'll ever be done again. I don't because
Oh no.
we fighters aren't they're not fighting as often. um they tend to be, because you've got the Eastern Europeans now, and there's a big focus on sort of how well you do as an amateur. Eastern European fighters in particular are pushed forward a lot quicker into sort of world class, and that's a trend that others are following in the boxing world now. So, I mean, to put it into perspective, I think didn't George Foreman? I think his record was 74 wins with 68 knockouts, I believe. Um,
Yeah, something like it might be 76 actually.
yeah,
Yeah. Anyways, his knockout percentage is also ridiculously high. Yeah,
yeah,
it really is. Um,
you know, and the quality of opposition that he got those knockouts against, to absolutely uh, destroy is a word that maybe is too often used, but he destroyed Joe Frazier not only once, but he did it twice. It was very similar. Um, it was sort of a more modern version of what Sonny Liston did to, I know one of your favourites, Bob, Floyd Patterson. He just absolutely, you know, poleaxed him. And then Joe Frazier comes back. I think it was 76, was it? I
yeah,
believe. And he shaved his head in
yeah,
a
his cue
bid to
ball.
make himself, yeah, in a bid to make himself more intimidating. And it didn't help, did it? Uh, just the fact that George Foreman could do that to men who gave Muhammad Ali nightmares. Ken Norton, another one.
Yeah, well,
And yeah,
I was 13 when Foreman absolutely destroyed, and that is the right word. Foreman destroyed Frazier, and a couple of years earlier, Frazier had comprehensively beaten Muhammad Ali, like the fight of the century, as it was called, or commonly just called the fight. It
yeah,
wasn't close. I mean, we like to think of it now as close, but it wasn't close. It was
no, it wasn't.
a unanimous points win for Frazier, and included a knockdown in the 14th round.
Yep.
Um, so when Foreman absolutely uh, beat Frazier, 6 knockdowns in 2 rounds. I mean, people like me who were Ali fans at the time were genuinely frightened that
Mm,
something terrible, up to including a fatal injury, was going to occur to Ali. And likewise, as you say, the comprehensive way in which he destroyed Kenny Norton, who Ali could not stop. Ali
no.
and Kenny Norton, they went the distance. It was absolutely incredible. And then even after his loss to Ali, which, I mean, I really do believe he fought the wrong fight. He should have
Yeah.
dominated the middle of the ring and said, "Okay, I'm the heavyweight champion of the world. Come on, player, come on."
Come
You
to
know,
me. Come to me.
yeah.
Yeah.
And Ali would have had to come to him, and Ali would have been badly hurt. But
Yeah.
Ali had this great strategic brain that allowed him to lull Foreman in. But
Mm,
even after that defeat, he comes back and he beats Ron Lyle.
yeah.
He beats Frazier for the second time, uh, and that's a great career. And then we've got the new George Foreman, the reinvented George Foreman in the
Yep.
1990s, who fought like Evander Holyfield couldn't stop him.
No. Tommy Morrison.
Yeah,
Um. Yeah. He just fought. He fought the who's who again, didn't he? Really.
yeah,
Um, and this is why I think he needs to be in that top five. And
yeah,
I'm not revising. It's very often, not very often that I sit down and think about it. The pantheon of heavyweights and where I'll place someone. But I just thought, given that we're coming into this video today, I thought it was important to really have a think about it and just. Again, I use the term, but longevity.
yeah,
I don't think he'll be beaten, and just the quality of opposition. And, it's emotional, isn't it? Like, I watched Mora. I actually watched Mora today with my friend Kev. Shout out to Kev. Um,
hi Kev.
watch Mora. Yeah, hi, Kev. I watched him fight Mora, and just afterwards, he's he's faith in God. That's what got him through. And
Yeah,
whether you believe in God or not, the man went from being a mugger on the mean streets of Texas, someone who wasn't very endearing,
yeah,
wasn't really someone that you want to spend much time with, just an updated version of Sonny Liston, if you will, to someone who just, he found himself in the nation's hearts. And much
absolutely.
like Ali, yeah, much like Ali, who is one of my heroes, he transcended boxing. And I'd like to think that, he's gone into the afterlife. He'd gone into the afterlife yesterday, and Ali will be the first one to greet him, and they'll be having dinner together up above.
You
So
know,
fair play, George Foreman.
one of the lovely things is that starting in, I think it was like 81, Foreman and Ali became firm friends. And apparently
Mm,
they would speak frequently. They would discuss all sorts of things: faith, fatherhood, boxing, religion, politics. They actually became really, really close friends. And George Foreman said that the person that was closest to him in the whole world was Muhammad Ali. And he
yeah.
went from hating Muhammad Ali and insisting on revenge to being like brothers with Muhammad Ali. And
Mm,
I think that's a really, really sweet story. um
beautiful.
it really is.
Mm,
I've just pulled up Foreman's box rec here. It's 76 wins, 68 KOs, 5 losses, 1 KO, and that 1 KO would be against Ali. um
yeah.
and again,
Shows how good Ali was, doesn't it? Really.
it really does. I mean, Ali absolutely um, tricked Foreman into
He
fighting a
did.
fight that Foreman shouldn't have fought. Ali, literally risked his life in doing so. And
Yep.
then Ali found that moment where Foreman was exhausted, and he hit Foreman right on the button, and Foreman went down. I think there's a legitimate argument to be made that the count was fast, but
Yeah, I would say so.
for every person who would think that, there's going to be some Ali fan who's going to say that I'm talking rubbish. But for the record, anybody who's listening out there, you and I are both Ali fans. So
Yeah, he's one of he's one of my favourite fighters. Him and Marvin Hagler probably up there as two of my favourites. So yeah, I just like the enduring image as well. An image that I will never sort of forget is from. I mean, obviously, I wasn't born when the fight was happening. I was born in 1990, but I am a big fan of When We Were Kings. And the most terrifying image is what he did to that heavy bag. In the
Mhm.
big shape in the heavy bag, just like Dick Sadler's holding on to it, and he's lifting him off his feet as he's just throwing these hooks. Imagine what that did to Ali's insides, you
Oh,
know?
I can't imagine. I'm sure you've seen it. There's an excellent. I used to own the VHS tape of it, and I've got a DVD of it now, called Champions Forever.
Yeah, I've seen it.
That
Yeah,
is so worth watching.
phenomenal.
It is. It ought to be in everybody's collection. Another thing that I've got, and I don't know if you've seen it. I'm sure you have. Is there's a
Go on.
book called, you know, you can read it on the screen. Once There Were
Yeah,
Giants: The Golden Age of Heavyweight Boxing.
I've not seen that, you know?
It's actually a really worthwhile read. It's a
Yeah,
relatively small paperback book, and it's available on Amazon. I've had this for ages. I don't know what it would go for now. But yeah, these are the kind of things that I like to sort of refresh my memory of. I think that when we go back to look at the sort of golden ages, whether that's the 1990s or the 1970s or the 1950s. For me, I find it sort of heartwarming, especially as modern boxing, we're sometimes drowning in BS that's being
yeah, of
thrown
course we are.
around. Um,
Yep.
Talking about BS, have you seen the Don Charles interview that I think he gave to Box Nation? Box Nation, I think it was them. They interviewed Andy Lee, and then they interviewed Don Charles. Did you see either of those?
I have seen the Andy Lee one. I've not seen the Don Charles one. The most recent Don Charles interview that I've seen was the one on Talksport, where he was just giving an explanation on the whole scenario that was just too long for me.
Well,
And yeah, I said on Porky's Corner, because I was on Porky's Corner a few days ago. I'm quite a big fan of psychology, Bob, and in psychology, you tend to find that if somebody is elaborating a bit too much, then maybe their story's a little bit BS, you know what I mean? A little bit bullshit.
Well,
It made me think.
the Box Nation one was quite similar to the Talk Sport one, except that he really sort of had a go at Andy Lee. Um,
Mm,
when Andy Lee was questioned by the interviewer, Andy Lee did say that he thought it was. Oh, what word did he use? He meant like coincidental or convenience. He didn't use either of
yeah,
those words, but he was sort of.
question. He didn't say questionable, but yeah, same sort of
Yeah,
vein. Yeah.
he was sort of saying that it seemed to fit too nicely that Dubois would withdrawn from the Parker fight, and then within 24 hours there was this talk of the undisputed with Usyk, and so
Mm,
Andy Lee was saying, I haven't seen any documentation. It seems a bit suspicious, but he was really low key about it. And then John Charles just had this angry outburst where he was calling Andy Lee simple minded and everything. And I just thought that that was, well, you're a pad holder talking to a former world champion. So really, you ought to have a bit more respect in your mouth. But
well, yeah, yeah, and also like I think a lot of times if someone gets aggressive in the face of questioning, makes you think, well, why are you getting aggressive? Do you know what I mean? There's valid points to be made. Argue them succinctly, argue them with respect. You don't need to shout. Why are you shouting? It just makes me think, Bob. And there's a lot we're not being told. And I've said before on other mediums, the longer Daniel Dubois stays away without saying a word and he's got people talking for him, the more that term silent ban comes to fruition in my mind.
yeah, it seems so incomprehensible to me that an elite world class athlete who pulls out of a fight with, like 48 hours to go or something is absolutely not heard from. I mean, like if you in the UK, if it was the centre forward for Manchester United, or if it was a quarterback in the NFL, the all of the sports media that cover that sport would be concerned, like what's
Yeah.
happening, and it seems that Daniel Dubois is just absolutely faded from view, and like if I was a fan, which to be fair to everyone listening, I am not a fan, but I'm not a hater of him. I just am not a big fan of his.
Yeah.
But if I was a big fan, I would actually be worried. Like, what's happened to my guy?
Yeah.
And
And,
I don't get it.
well, I am worried really because at the end of the day, Joseph Parker, I mean, common sense has prevailed, because there's talk of him fighting Usyk next. But surely he wouldn't have wanted to go into that fight like that. I think he would have wanted to really gain true plaudits by going in there and beating Daniel Dubois. So, all right. I mean, he'll be happy that he's got the shot, but he would have wanted to go in there feeling like he was the man. I'm a belt holder. I'm a champion. I want to go in there and face another champion. Instead, he bowled over a very, very overweight, very underprepared Martin Bakole. And I said it before, you can only beat who's put in front of you. But the competitive beast within Joseph Parker, I think, would have wanted to go into a fight with Alexander Usyk with a little bit more momentum, maybe a little bit more practice under his belt,
Yeah,
as
because
opposed to, beating Barney
yeah,
Rubble or what.
he beat Deontay Wilder, who's shot. I mean,
Hmm.
he did win against Zhilei Zhang, but it was not a comprehensive beating. I mean, he got off the deck twice to beat him. It wasn't like the way Ajit Kabayel beat him.
Hmm.
Um, and Bakole, I mean, I'm not sort of underrating that win, but on the other hand, it was against an unprepared, grotesquely overweight Bakole. It would have been
Yeah,
great if, for his own confidence and his own sort of stature, if he'd gone in and he'd beaten Daniel Dubois, who, I mean, Dubois looked razor sharp
yeah,
in the run up to that fight. I thought I was going to lose my money because I put a few bucks on Parker, and I was certain my money had gone.
yeah.
Um, yeah, it just seems it's such a
Well, that's
bizarre story.
I mean that's my point, Bob. To couple what you're saying, you'd want to go in there. Your ego, your confidence would be through the roof if he's gone in there
Oh,
and beaten the best version of Daniel Dubois. Instead, he fought
absolutely.
a underprepared jelly baby, didn't he? Really.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
yeah, like great to have Bacoli's name on your record, but yeah, I mean, I don't know what it tells us about Parker, and
well,
I don't know what it tells us about Bacoli either, to be honest with you.
no. Well, the thing is with Bacoli, he's still got that fight with F.A. Jagba in May. I'm not sure
Yeah,
when in May that is, but he's going to be fighting F.A. Jagba in May, so he's got a second bite of the cherry.
yeah,
So
it won't be for
we'll
an
see what happens.
IBF eliminator though.
Oh, right, okay. I
Yeah,
wasn't aware of
so
that.
yeah, it won't be for the IBF final eliminator. It's just a fight, which of course,
Yeah,
it's a fight that'll help him in ratings or whatever, but I would imagine he would beat F.A. Ajagba. What do you
yeah,
think?
I would say so. Yeah, I think F.A. Jagba is very stiff. I think Americans, well, you'll be more au fait with that side of the pond than I am, Bob. But I think Americans sort of anyone who's black and sort of big, they're like, oh yeah, like he's the second coming. He reminds me a little bit F.A. Jagba of Michael Grant.
Yes, that's a
Very
good.
sort of,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, very stiff. He was a bit of a puncher, but not any sort of great shakes. So I think Bacoli's going to be far better prepared. Surely, I'm sure he would have got into the gym pretty soon after getting beaten by Parker. I think he'll come in a lot more prepared. And I mean, that was his original assignment anyway, wasn't it? He wasn't supposed to be fighting Parker. So yeah, I think he'll get in there and get the job done and get back on track. But I want to see. Looking forward to seeing Parker and Usyk. The fight I really wanted was Ajit Kabayel against Usyk because Kabayel, I think, has an even better shot because he's a body puncher, and we know Usyk doesn't really like body shots. So
Yeah,
would have been very interesting.
a great, a great duo of fights in my mind, which probably would be unfair to Parker, but to have Parker and Dubois rescheduled so that Parker and Dubois could fight for the IBF, and then give Kabayel and Usyk an opportunity, and so winner against winner. I I think the style matchup for Kabayel and Usyk would be really, really interesting. Um,
Mm.
I, I, I actually really, really like both fighters. That would be very hard to sort of to pick. I think Usyk would have too much for Kabayel, but in way of
Yeah.
experience. But I wouldn't be. I wouldn't be guaranteeing that Usyk would beat Kabayel. I wouldn't guarantee that Usyk will beat Parker. And in fact,
No.
I'm not sure. And I want to say this sort of carefully in a way. I'm not sure if Dubois can't beat Usyk either, and that's because I actually do not necessarily trust that Dubois is coming in as clean athlete.
Well, I mean, you don't even need to mention the clean athlete thing, Bob. He's already lost. And, people are making far too much of this low blow situation. Was it a low blow? Wasn't it a low blow? The fact is, he had 11 other rounds to do the job. And I've said it before, he went down off a jab,
Yeah,
didn't get back up.
yeah,
So
he gave
he
up.
lost by knockout. Yeah, he lost by knockout to Usyk. So, you know, momentum's fine. But when you fight in the Maestro, Usyk is the man. So
Yeah,
there's everyone. There's everyone. They're there. And Usyk is up
above them.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
every time I think, and we talked about this, I think, on one of our other conversations, every time I think about this, uh, you know, Usyk goes down off whether it was a low blow or a legitimate blow, doesn't matter. The refs called it a low blow. Usyk's down. He gets up. Dubois should have been on him. And I recently,
yeah.
only yesterday, did I watch the Ron Lyle Foreman fight for like
Yeah. So,
the 100th time or something. And those guys are swinging. They are almost like wild. Where was
yeah.
Dubois? Dubois knows you can smell blood in the water. Your man is not
Mm.
fully recovered. You are bigger and stronger than him. You should have been on him like a rash.
He should
Uh,
have been. But I think Dubois is too rigid. I think he's too textbook. and he's a decent finisher, yeah, because he's a big puncher, but everything is very, very textbook. You
Yeah.
know, people have made the comparison Anthony Joshua to Frank Bruno years ago.
Yes.
I think Dubois is a lot more akin to Frank Bruno than Anthony Joshua was. Very
Yeah.
sort of
I think
robotic, not robotic, but everything's just very
great
classically
lines.
European.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I think Frank
classically
Bruno was.
European.
I think Frank Bruno was better than both those guys, actually. To be honest with you.
Yeah,
So
so do I. He was
yeah,
a monster puncher, wasn't
yeah, I like Frank Bruno.
he? Yeah,
It was unfortunate that Frank Bruno ran into Tyson at the time, and of course the big fight with Lennox Lewis. Do you remember that fight?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't remember it like live. I was around then. It was 1993, wasn't it? But
Yeah,
Bruno again, he just showed that good fundamentals could really do the job. He had a great jab. His gas tank just always let him down. And the thing
yeah,
about Bruno is he only ever lost to world champions. There's no shame in that.
yeah. No, absolutely.
Um,
I always
yeah,
thought
fair
Bruno
play.
was too. He was too muscly. He was too much of a bodybuilder. Um,
Yeah,
kind of the same as AJ in a way.
yeah. He's got a better body than AJ Frank Bruno, even
Oh
now.
yeah,
Phenomenal.
he was just cut. But
Yeah,
that was a funny fight because around that time, Frank Bruno was sort of really British, right? He was a real Englishman, where
yep,
the British public were still kind of like looking at Lennox Lewis a little bit as like, well, what are you? Like you're a Canadian, like,
yeah,
you know. And that fight, the crowd were really sort of supporting Frank Bruno, and it was afterwards that the crowd, the British public, sort of re-embraced Lennox Lewis. So
yeah. Well, I don't think we really embraced Lennox Lewis as a Brit or embraced Lennox Lewis's achievements until after he retired.
yeah, that might be
I think
true. Yeah.
a lot of people are like that, but you don't know what you've got till it's gone, and that is nowhere more true than boxing, really, because us fans love a moment, particularly in Britain. We love a loser. Soon as someone starts winning, you start disliking them. It's strange over here.
Yeah, it's the tall poppy syndrome. They've got to be cut
Yeah,
down, right?
yeah,
Um,
definitely.
it's a funny thing that even sort of going back to Henry Cooper, he was so beloved by the British public.
Mm,
And I loved Henry Cooper. I mean, I actually, was very upset when Bugner beat Henry Cooper. But if we
yep.
looked at every time that Henry Cooper moved to the world level, Henry Cooper came
Yeah,
unstuck, right? Now
he did.
he came unstuck against Muhammad Ali, and he also came unstuck against Floyd Patterson, who
Yep.
showed that a fighter with two good hands will always beat a fighter with one good hand. So,
Yeah,
but it was almost like you know the British public loved their game losers.
yeah.
Tried really hard but didn't quite make it. You were loved and adored. If you
That's why.
won, then you were
Yeah,
thought of as being a bit sort of,
arrogant.
a bit above yourself, a bit above your station. Who does he think he
Yeah,
is, kind of thing.
like you had people like Billy Walker and people like that. And Billy Walker was seen as this game hard nut. But yeah, I mean, if
Yeah,
he'd have
Brian
become a world,
London.
yeah, Brian London. I had a friend of mine knew Brian London and sort of told me a few stories about him working on the doors. He was an handy lad, I'll tell you
Yeah.
that.
Well,
Yeah.
I remember. I remember when Richard Dunn fought Joe Bugner, and I think Richard Dunn had a "This Is Your Life" prepared for him. And
All right.
Richard Dunn was, with the greatest respect, he was a former para who was a really handy, hard man, but he was absolutely not world class. But he was
No.
really popular. People liked him. And it was that was actually the one time that Joe Bugner really sort of lost his temper or gave it his all, and he absolutely thrashed Richard Dunn.
I'll have to watch that one, Bob. I'll
Oh,
have
you
to watch
will.
that one.
Well, the run up to
Yeah.
the fight was also amazing because Richard Dunn and his wife started calling Joe Bugner a sugar plum fairy, and that really sort of stuck with Bugner, and he was not having any of it. It was
All right.
it was an absolute beating. Hey, I,
I
I
bet he,
noticed I noticed we're coming up to 30 minutes. Shall we take a 5-minute break and then continue?
yeah. Yeah, I'll
Oh,
see you in part two.
Yeah, see you shortly. Okay.
All right, Bob.
Thanks,
Bye bye.
James. Bye bye. So that's James. We're going to take a 5 minute break and then we're going to come back for part two of our discussion. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Cheers.